Hi everyone. So it was proving quite difficult to give everyone really detailed feedback on your analysis task that you came up with for this track and field competition programme. So what I decided was I would just complete the task myself and then talk you through some of the decisions and the thinking that I made. Now that doesn't mean that the things that you've put on yours are wrong if you've not got the exact same as me. Analysis is really open to interpretation, and one difficult thing that we've got with this task is that we're just basing it on one A4 page of information. If there was any clarifications that we wanted to ask, we'd be going back and forward to the client and asking questions to make sure that our analysis was absolutely spot on. Okay, so don't worry if you've perhaps not put in bits that I have. I've just been thinking about it, I suppose, from the pupil and the teacher perspective and making decisions and assumptions where I feel that is appropriate. Okay, so what I thought was it's easier for me to talk through my thinking and everything that I created, and then hopefully you can compare yours as well. I will go through and have a look at them all and give you, some sort of response, but this is your sort of detailed feedback. Okay, so I started off with the purpose. Now I think the purpose is fairly obvious, although I'm not a big, athletics person or watch Olympics very much. I think you can get the idea that it's based around the track and field competition, that the purpose is for the administrators or the people who are working with the company or the organisation to input data from the different competitors, and that will calculate who moves into the finals and then who wins each event. Okay, now the output as well is also going to be able to see all of the information, so the competitors and the administrators, and I suppose the people who are viewing the competition, if there's any, want to be able to see what's coming up on the screen. Okay, so that's also important too. It doesn't say on the screen that it outputs any of like the medal winners. That probably happens at the proper events, but throughout the whole competition you should be able to see what's happening. Okay, the scope, I really just looked at the appendix and, to be honest, copied that because it had all of the information that I needed. It's basically the plan for a whole program or a software development task from start to finish, right the way through to evaluation. So I kept that the same, just copy and pasted it in. Now, boundaries is where I put in my information about validation. There's quite a lot of numbers going in, so I think that it's really quite reasonable to say that we're going to use some validation on that, and it is required for advanced hire. Okay, you can decide on a validation range if you wanted to there, or I've just put that I want to make sure that no negatives are inputted in. Okay, also, it's assumed that all the track events have a semi-final and final. I got a little bit confused because it kept going between talking about who makes it into the semi-final, and I was like, well, surely there has to be a race before that. But because the screens only wanted semi-finals and finals to be shown for track events and then qualifications and finals for field events, I've just put that as an assumption and said those are the only two things we're going to show. In the real event, maybe there would be more than that, and that could be a conversation you would want to have with the client, but at the moment that's what I went for. Now, the ones in green are the assumptions that I've added upon trying to fill out the rest of this information, and it wasn't really explicitly said. So it said that it would look at each field competitor at their first 3 attempts and work out who would move on to the next stage, but it didn't say how many. So I've just put in a number of 4 there to match up with the final for the track events. Okay, so I've just said the top 4 field competitors will move into the final, and then I also said that it assumed that rather than using the last 3 results, it would take the best of the last 6 field results to be able to work out who the field finalist was. So it wasn't like if you did an amazing first run or first distance javelin throw, whatever it might be, if you do 5 that are just slightly less than that, you can still use your first answer. So that's what I decided. Again, it wasn't explicitly said, which is why I've put them in green to remember to point them out to you. Okay, now end user requirements, the customers here, we're going to ignore viewers for a second, right? If there's audience or whatever, then they don't really need the system, although it's good to be able to see it. We're going to say the customers are the competitors, and the competitors only really need to view information. That's the only thing they have with the system. Yes, some of them will win, some of them will lose, some of them will or won't move into the finals, but the system's job isn't to do that. That's the administrator or some sort of other role within the company. Okay, so I've just said that they want to be able to view the information that comes up on the screens. Okay, the administrators need to be able to view that information as well, but they also need to be able to input all relevant information. Now, rather than listing it all again, I've just put in brackets there, see inputs, and I've got the inputs a little bit later on. Okay, they also need to be able to receive some information, so they need to work out who's going to be going into a final track event. At that point in time, we don't need to show any specific clear functions there. We just need to know that they can get that information out. They also need to know who gets first, second, and third in a track event, and then the same with the field events as well. Okay, who moves from qualification to the final, and then who gets the top 3 scores. When it comes to the functional requirements, the customers, they don't ever really need to input directly into the system. The only thing that you might have listed in there is the same information as above, where they can view the information, okay? Everything else is not, but actually that's an output, so it wouldn't be listed there, okay? So there's no input from the customers. In fact, you could leave that box blank. When it comes to the admin, you've got basically a list of everything that's needed there. I've added some information, so I've said that if you see personal best later on, it's just shown as PB to make it a bit shorter. The race time if it's a track event that's chosen, and then the distance or the height if it's a field event chosen. Obviously that would be different depending on which one. And then up to 6 of these can be input as well. So just to know that there might be a wee array of records or something needing to happen in there, so you can input more than one, okay? Now remember, you shouldn't have listed in here your competitor number, because that's not input. It says the system will allocate a competitor number. So please make sure you don't have that included in that section. Okay, processes. Assign competitors a unique competitor number, like I've just mentioned. Store all the details in a database. And then I've got lots of information about calculating the fasted 4 times to be able to work out who goes to the final, and then the fasted 3 times to work out first, second, and third. Okay, and then same with the track attempts. However, there has to be an extra level of complexity, in the field events, because you need to work out the longest for each person. So your information you're storing about each person, you might need to store, say, 6 6 heights for the long jump, and then you need to be able to find very quickly what their longest height is, which you might decide to store in a separate variable or something, or you might have some sort of subprogram that looks through it and does it for you, okay? So you're going to need to calculate their biggest score and then work out of all of them whose is the biggest one, who's getting to move on. Okay, and that happens again in the final, but it's all 6 attempts. So I kind of put in some information there, and these 2 green parts match up with my assumptions that I put earlier on in the analysis. Okay, for the outputs, this is the bit where I kind of wrote down everything needs to be displayed. Now I took these from the pictures. Now it doesn't say competitor number anywhere, so I haven't listed that there, but you see the event name and the stage that goes up in the top left and right hand corners need to be there. Lane number, although it's not something we have stored, would need to come in the display part, so it would just be a counter or something. Competitor's name, personal best, race time, and then the field events are all listed there, but obviously you only need the 4th, 5th and 6th attempt when it is a final. The rest of the time there would only be 3 attempts, so that was important to list down as well, although it wasn't really clear from the picture. And again, you could just put those 3 as empty or a dash or something, depending on how you want to show it. Okay, feedback to the administrator, so that still counts as output, although it's not being displayed on a screen as such. They need to be able to do all those calculations about who moves into the finals and who wins each event that I mentioned earlier on. Okay, so you'll notice that quite a lot of this information is duplicated above in what needs to be calculated or what needs to be done for like the end user requirements. Constraints. Now, the constraint section was basically a free-for-all because you weren't told on that document what you needed to use, what system it was going to run on or anything. Okay, so I just went with basically the same of the information that was there. I took out live code because we're never going to do it in live code, but capabilities to be able to do this in Visual Basic or Python. We are working with Windows operating systems at school, so if we were going to create this program, it would have to work with that. And I've just said the work must be completed within 8 hours. It might take you less time, it might take you more time than that. You could have changed that number, absolutely fine. Okay, that would need to be a back and forward conversation with the client. So if any of you had asked me that question, I would have given you some hints and tips. Okay. Now, feasibility study, this is the bit that wouldn't be included in a real analysis. Like for your program, you don't need to do this section anymore, okay? So I've just kind of put in some generic information. So we will have access to Python, which is open source, or Visual Basics available in school, so we don't need to purchase software. Because we're going to be using a database system, we can use PHP, MyAdmin, MySQL, both free sources, which we can get access to. So there's not really any monetary values. We also don't need to buy any copyrights because we're just working with our own data. In time, I predict the project is likely to take me 6 hours. You guys are probably going to put a longer time than that because you don't have the same experience coding at that level as I do. Okay, so I know how to do things like a bubble sort, which will be really useful for this, and you guys haven't done that yet, and that's fine. Also, if you decided you want to do it in Python, you might say that you don't know how to do it as much in Python, so it's going to take you longer if you include things like training and stuff. Okay, so again, totally fine whatever you've put for that section. Under legal, I've said that we don't have any kind of copyright issues because there's no images or anything as such. And then I've also said that we would need to make sure that we looked into the GDPR regulations and just checked that we had all the correct permissions for storing competitors' data onto the system. Under technical, the program is within my capabilities. I've done coding like that before. You guys might say you need to do a little bit of training, especially what you would be really useful to work out first, second, third is be able to do sorts. Now you know you're going to learn that, but you haven't done it yet. So you may have played that two ways. You may have pretended you're further in the course than you have, or you might have mentioned you still need to do that. I myself and you guys will definitely need to do some training on how to get these proper connections between Python and the database or Visual Basic in the database. Obviously, if it hadn't said the word database, we could have been using Visual Basic and comma separated value files and things like that, which we've done from higher already. But that's definitely something we need to do a bit of training on if we want to use databases. And also I've said that all the functional and end user requirements are able to be met by Python and Visual Basic. So I know that it's technically feasible, which is the important part. Now, under possible survey questions, I suppose I kind of treated this like my questions that I would put back to my client. Okay, so I said things like the output screen. Do you want that to constantly change, like refresh every, 10, 20 seconds so that you can then see the next event? Or do you want the users to be able to have like a wee touchscreen tablet that they can pick which event to have a little look at and then see the different scores? They might only be interested in field events, for example. So that was quite a relevant question, I thought. I also put, would you prefer to have 6 attempts for the field final or just show the last 3? I think all 6 makes sense if we're going to use all 6. But again, that was an assumption that I had, so I'd have to clarify that with the clients. Do you have a specific font size or type you want to be used, or do you have any specific branding or colour schemes? Okay, just because that's something that's really easy to change. I tend to make my survey questions so that you can give a little bit of kind of individuality as opposed to the client, but actually the colours don't make any difference to you and your coding. It doesn't make anything more complicated. Now, here was my use case diagram. I have to say that there was the whole question that I've given you was actually originally a use case diagram question, and they didn't have quite as much complexity in it as I have. So it's just because of what I've pulled out of the information. You might have, it might be different, is what I'm meaning, right? You can't get them always identical or spot on. So I've just tried to do what I can. So let me explain you through my thinking, right? Although the competitors don't ever put information into the computer system, they do get to see the competition results. So I've included them in my system. So I've said the competitors can view results and the database administrators inherit that. So they can also see the displayed competition results, whatever format that looks like, whether it's a choice or whether it's a flicking through screen, okay? What the administrator needs to be able to do that the competitors cannot is add form details. Now that includes, because every single time you add a form detail, it should be issuing a competitor number or checking whether a competitor number already exists for that person. So that's a part that is included, has to be used. When you calculate the finalists, we've got an extension on that one because only if it's a field event do you need to calculate the best of 3 for each competitor and then calculate the finalists from that. If it's a track event, you just calculate the top 3 or top 4 and then move them into the final. Okay, when you're calculating the medal winners, again, if it's a field event, you're calculating the best of 6. And because all of that information is stored in a database, so being brought from there or saved in, if it's the add form details to the database on the right hand side, which is your secondary actor, connects to all of those things. Okay, so hopefully you've got something similar to that. It was quite a big task, so I appreciate that you've spent a bit of time over it. So I'm going back, and have a little look at what it is that you guys have done, but hopefully that all makes sense and you can kind of understand, and that'll give you a bit of a basis of some of the types of things that you can include in your own analysis. Remember the analysis that you hand in after the holidays. I won't be marking, it's just to give you that first deadline, and I can kind of have a look over your idea and your concept and just check that it's okay. If you've got any questions, give me a shout. Don't be stressed about it, okay? If it all doesn't work out and you want to start again, that's fine, but just try to use your time to your advantage over the holidays and get this done, okay? I'll speak to you guys later. Have a lovely summer and good luck. Bye.